Hello friends, welcome back. In this episode, I'm going to cover the move knight to f3. Against this, our approach is universal. We are going to play the move d5. And now white has three interesting choices. Amongst them, knight captures d5 is not a good move because straight away black can equalize after the following move order, that is knight captures knight, pawn captures, queen captures, d4, and now the move bishop to g4. So we enter into one of the transposition of the Scandinavian defense, where not only black has developed his all three pieces, but black can easily castle on the next move and then look out for the quick move e5. In short, white has given up the advantage straight away in the opening. So that's why knight captures d5 is not recommended at this position. The second interesting move white can try over here is e captures d5, which I personally found out very interesting. Here I recommend that you should capture this pawn, and now white has three good choices. The first move I want to have a look is bishop to c4. Well, against this I'm recommending that you should play the move knight to b6, immediately attacking the bishop. And in one crazy game my opponent tried this sacrifice, which is bishop captures f7. I'm including this in this lecture because you never know, some psycho play against you, so you should know what exactly you are going to do about it. Here you should certainly capture this piece, and the whole idea of the white is to throw this check with the move knight to g5, and the best place for the king is to place on g8. Afterwards white is going to play the move queen to f3. Here black should continue with the move queen to e8, defending the critical f7 square, and my opponent responded with knight to b5. So his idea is pretty much clear. He wants to capture the c7 pawn and then forking my queen and a rook. Well, it looks good, but after the move queen to g6, I think white has a long-term problems. And that can be seen in this game. My opponent captured the c7 pawn, thinking that I have to move the rook. But here comes the big shot, that is knight to d4. So not only hitting the queen, but this knight and the c2 squares are also hanging. After long thinking, my opponent plays only good reply, that is queen to f4, so protecting his knight. But then I continue with the move knight captures c2 check, king to d1, and now the strongest move of the game, that is e5. Kindly note, white cannot capture this pawn because at the end white will lose extra knight, so that's not possible. And in the game my opponent responded with the move queen to f3, but after this the task is very easy. I can capture this rook, and when Ruy capture the rook, I can snap off this knight. And you can see after the whole complications, black emerged with 2-piece advantage. So this is one wonderful line if your opponent plays the psycho type move bishop captures f7. The more subtle replies are bishop to b3. Against this, I'm recommending a very crystal clear plan. So what you are going to do over here is, you first of all play the move bishop to f5. The general line goes with the castle on the king side. Now you play the move e6. Of course, white has to finish his development, so he has to play the move d4 to free up his other bishop. Here we will continue with the move bishop to e7. The most aggressive response by the white is to play bishop to f4, so pressurizing the c7 square. No matter, we are going to castle on the king side. And now you don't need to afraid of the move knight to b5. The simple reason is black can play the move rook to c8, not only defending the c7 square, but we are soon hitting that knight with the move a6. So that's not a good move. The main line goes with the move rook to e1. Afterwards we have a very simple but very effective plan. What we want to do is to play the knight to the a5 and then look out for the move c5. And if you can manage to play the c5 at the right time, you get a comfortable and a slight advantageous position. To see this, let me show you a model game which will highlight what are the problems white is facing in this line. Here I immediately responded with the move knight to a5. My opponent plays the move h3, stopping bishop to g4 idea. I immediately capture the bishop, and when he recapture, I give a flight square for my king as well as bishop in case if it's attacked. My opponent responded here with the move knight to e5, which is a typical move whenever white has this sort of space in the center. But this is exactly the right time where we are going to hit back in the center with the move c5. After a long thinking, my opponent finds nothing better than capturing this pawn. I recapture with the bishop, and now he doesn't want to play the move queen to e2 and defending the c2 square. So instead of that, he decided to exchange the queen and then put his knight on the e4 square, which at first sight looks tremendous because it's attacking the bishop, and if black wants to save the bishop, then he has to retrieve back either to e7 or f8. Well, that's not the case. Black captured this knight, and when white recaptured the piece, now black has this amazing move, that is rook to c8. So you can already see these two rooks are very much aggressively placed. There is already ongoing pressure on the c2 square, and although white has managed to bundle up this piece on king side, but they are not actually doing anything. Furthermore, black has created a threat, that is white cannot capture this a7 pawn. In fact, in the game, my opponent fall for this one. He captured this pawn, and now I'll give you a few minutes over here. Can you identify a move order which will give black an upper hand? Okay, I hope you find this move, that is f5. The whole idea of f5 is this rook is right now protecting this bishop, and after the move f5, this rook can no longer protect this bishop. So in the game, my opponent plays the move rook to e1, but now comes the tactics, that is knight to d5, simultaneously attacking two pieces which white cannot defend both of them. If rook to a4, then b5 is a very strong move. So in the game, my opponent decided to capture the b7, but after knight captures f4, black emerged with a piece ahead, and white has some pawns on the queen side, but they are crippled pawns, and after some complications, I managed to convert the full point. So that was a model game which will highlight what are the good plans for black in this system. Now the second move I can try over here is bishop to b5, but this is rather a dull move. It's okay, white can manage to double the black pawn, but same time white lose his bishop pair. So I don't mind this, and against this I'm recommending that a simple idea, that is knight captures c3. If your opponent plays the move bishop captures c6 at this point, then I recommend that you should play the move captures c6, and after b captures c3, you should play the move queen to d5. Black has this double pawn, but so did as white, and not to mention black has a bishop pair. Also, white has to play very carefully. For example, at this point, if white foolishly castle on the king side, then after bishop to g4, we will create another set of double pawns on the white king side. So that means at this point, white has to place the move h3. And now I am strongly recommending that you exchange the queen with the move queen to e4. The simple reason is, after this exchange of queen, black left with the bishop pair, and that can be a very critical factor in the endgame. So that was about immediate bishop captures c6. The stronger move over here is b captures c3. Afterwards, I'm recommending that you should play the move queen to d5. So hitting the bishop. Now if your opponent defend that bishop with the move c4 or a4, let's say for example with the move c4, then after queen to e4 check, queen to e2, exchanging the queen and placing the bishop on the d7, it is black who has the better pawn structure, and white has a long-term problem to resolve this double pawns. So that's why c4 or a4 is not good. The most critical line is queen to e2. But after this, I'm recommending that you should immediately place the move bishop to g4. If white is giving us double pawn, so what? We are giving him back. One of my internet game goes like this. So my opponent responded here with the move c4. I responded with the move queen to f5, and now he gave me this double pawn, which I happily accepted, and then he plays the move d4. For a moment it looks like black has these weaknesses, but we are about to create weaknesses on the white king side. First, I responded with the move rook to d8, hitting the d4 pawn. My opponent defended with the move c3, and now I place the move c5. So you can see these weaknesses can easily be dissolved by such a move order. My opponent plays the move bishop to e3, I capture this pawn, and then again hitting with the move e5. Now e5 created a threat that black wants to play the move e4, so my opponent destroy this pawn with the d captures e5, but this is exactly black wants. Black can complete his all piece development with the move bishop to b4 check. Kindly note this bishop cannot come to the d2 square, so white has the only reply left, that is king to f1. Afterwards black can simply castle on the king side. My opponent continue with the move h3. I place the move bishop captures f3. He recaptured with the queen, hoping that I'm going to do a queen trade, but no, I played the move queen to e5. And we should stop over here. The simple reason is, yes, material is balanced, but the only big difference over here is, look at this wonderful rooks, they are connected, and look at this disjoint rooks and a pathetic king. Only black can play for advantage in such a position. So that was all you need to know against the move bishop to b5. The most critical response over here is to play the move d4. But the good thing from the black perspective is, more or less all this kind of setup, we are going to play the move bishop to f5. And if your opponent plays the move bishop to c4, then there will be a transposition of the line of knight to b6. So the only independent move over here is to play bishop to d3. No matter, we are going to capture this bishop. When white recapture with the queen, we are going to play the move e6. So it's the same setup. We take out this bishop outside the pawn chain, then we play e6, then we play bishop to e7, then castle on the king side, and then quickly go for the c5. Kindly remember this plan in your own game and you will have a very comfortable game. Now once again, I like to show you a model game in this line where my opponent was 2100 plus and he responded here with the move castle on the king side. I responded as per our usual plan, so I played bishop to e7. He responded with the move rook to e1. I castle on the king side, and now indeed black is threatening the move knight to b4. If white plays the passive move such as a3, then I recommend that you should capture this knight, giving white a double pawn, and then simply play the move queen to d7. If you place pieces like this, you will have a very comfortable game. White has a hard time to prove his advantage. So probably understanding this, at this point my opponent decided to capture this knight. I captured with the queen, and now my opponent's idea was to play the move c4. Tremendous space in the center. No matter, we can play the move queen to d7, and now he responded with the move bishop to f4. So this is, you can say, one of the most aggressive setup by white. White has developed his all minor piece and he has a tremendous center, but black is rock solid and black doesn't have any problems. Now this game will give you a very good idea the tactical possibilities in this kind of setups. Here I continue with the move rook f to d8, so attacking the d4 square, and my opponent obviously defended with the move rook to d1. So at first sight it looks like white is all good and it has a wonderful position, but that can be an illusion. The move I played is knight captures d4, bam. So always look out for such a possibilities. Now there is no way white can capture with the queen. The simple reason is black can reply with the move queen to a4, so hitting the queen, hitting the rook, and if b3, then the simplest is capturing the queen, and when white recapture the queen, you can capture the piece. So white has some structural deficit, and not to mention black is a clear pawn up. So this is a winning position for black. So the obvious move after the knight captures d4 is knight captures knight. Well, after this we are going to play the move c5, regaining our piece. My opponent responded over here with the move queen to g3, which is a very tricky move. His idea is that when I recapture my piece, he can throw this surprise, that is rook to d4. Very cheeky. The thing is, if you foolishly capture this rook, then after the move bishop to e5, you have to give up your queen and the game. So obviously I didn't fall for that. After long thinking, I come out with a stronger move, that is queen to e8, hitting the rook. Now the engine suggests here the best move is bishop to e5, but after this move I'm recommending that black should continue with the move f6, hitting the bishop. So that more or less oblige white to give up the d file, and when bishop drop backs to the c3, then you can play the move e5. So black has more attacking chances than white in this kind of scenario. Instead of this, he played the obvious looking move, that is rook to d1. And it looks very natural, doubling your rook on the d file and do not give up the d file. But in fact, this move turns out as a disaster. I wonder if you can spot it. I give you a few minutes over here. Try to identify what is the problem in this move. Okay, I hope you find this move, that is rook captures d4, and after rook captures d4, e5. Amazing pawn sacrifice, and you should always look out for such things in your own game. So what's the big idea? The first thing is white is obliged to capture this pawn because it's forking two pieces. So after the move bishop captures e4, now the idea reveals, that is f6, and after bishop to f4, bishop to c5. So one way you can say it's a clearance sacrifice. By sacrificing a pawn, black has created a tremendous counterplay. So you can already see this rook is attacked, there's a back rank mate exists. In other words, white has the only reply, that is rook to d1. And now queen to e2, attacking two spots. So white has the first reply, that is rook to c1. And now rook to d8, another threat, that is rook to d1, and threatening a checkmate. Suddenly from nowhere, just giving up a pawn, black activity is completely rolling down on the king side. It is very clear over here that white has to do something about his back rank. So my opponent obviously played the move h3. I played now the second attacking move, that is rook to d3, hitting the queen, and now queen has to stay in touch with the f2, otherwise f2 will drop. So the only move left is queen to h4. Once again, I like you to pause this video and find out a move which will clearly give a winning advantage to the white. Okay, the move is h5. Unbelievable. In fact, this is not the move I have played in the game. After some complication, the game was initially drawn, but when I was analyzing this game with the Fritz engine, I was amazed that black has this resource, that is h5. Okay, so let's see what is the big idea of h5. Now let's see some moves further. So these are the best moves suggested by the engine, that is white has to place the move rook to f1. Afterwards, black will play the move bishop to d6, and after bishop captures bishop, now you can see the whole idea behind the h5. Black has this wonderful move g5, trapping the sweetheart. Now the third critical try white can done over here is to play the move e5, but this is less dangerous than e captures d5. The simple reason is you can guess black's next move. Yep, it's d4, same old story which we have done against the move f4. As I have already mentioned that white cannot give up the ground by playing the move knight to e2. The simple reason is black can play the move knight to g4, and if black plays the move d3 over here, then the simple is capturing this pawn. It's just a normal game where black has thrown this horrible move d3, which actually white doesn't want to play. And instead of d3, if white plays the most obvious looking move, that is c3, then after d3, knight to f4, hitting the d3, we can capture the e5 pawn. It's not that black can hold on to this point, but it is more relevant to the position. So white can get his pawn back after this sequence, that is queen to a4 check, bishop to d7, and then queen to e4. So obviously black has to save his piece with the move knight to g6, but after knight captures, bishop to c6, and queen to e3, we can simply reply with the move e6. And it's a laughable position for white. None of his bishop can come out, and on the next move black can play the move bishop to d6 and then quickly go for the king side castle and then get hell loose on the white king. So obviously this time around we get the same position, except the difference is in the f4 variation white has the f4 pawn. In this variation white has this knight posterior on f3, which is a kind of better than f4. But anyways, that doesn't discount our plan of campaign. We have the pretty much same plan against both white setup. Now here white can also capture with this knight, but moving the one piece twice is not recommended, so other two moves needs to be considered. If your opponent plays the move queen captures d2, then the very obvious is you exchange the queen and capture this g7 pawn with the bishop. And after white castle on the queen side, this is all I have explained in my previous lecture, you can immediately play the move bishop to g4. If allowed, then black can double the white pawn. So generally white defend with the move bishop to e2, and now you simply castle on the queen side with a very comfortable game. Now one thing white should not do in this variation is to play the move h3, and after, let's say, bishop goes back to the h5, goes for this bishop with this move order, that is g4, bishop to g6 and knight to h4. This has happened in one of my game, but this is a complete disaster. The simple reason is black has a very strong reply over here, and that is knight to d4. Hitting the bishop with check and the same time hitting the c2. The only way to defend this both threat is to play the move bishop to d3, but after bishop captures, pawn captures, white has this horrible weakness on d3, which is more than enough for black to create a winning chances. So instead of this, white should play the move rook to e1, but after this we can simply reply with the move e6 with a reasonable winning chances in the middle game. So that was about queen to d2. The most obvious response is bishop captures d2. We are going to capture this pawn, which force white to play the move c3, and now we play our trademark move, that is queen to d5. Here I like to show you one of my model game, which will give you ideas and plans exist in this line. My opponent responded with the move bishop to e2. I responded with the move e5. He castled on the king side, and now I can play the move e4. So this is a very ambitious setup by the black. Here my opponent responded with the move knight to e1. I complete my piece development with the move bishop to e6. He responded with the move bishop to f4, hitting my c7 square, and now I simply castle on the queen side. We should castle on the queen side as quickly as possible because we have the open g file, and that means we have a very good chances to attacking the white king side. In this game my opponent exchanged the queen, which I happily accepted, and now he plays the move knight to c2. So it has a very cunning idea to read out the knight in the e3 square and attacking my rook. So I counter this with equally sneaky move, that is knight to e5. He continued with the move knight to e3, but this is exactly I want. I played the move rook to d2, hitting two spots which white cannot defend both of them. So he tried to do some complication with bishop captures e5, bishop captures e5, and bishop to c4. Doesn't matter, I greedily capture that pawn. He captured my bishop, which gave me double pawn on the e file, and now I have a threat on the c3 square, which my opponent defended with the move rook to c3, and then I played rook to f8, hitting the f2. Here my opponent goes wrong. He thought that he can play this move, that is knight to g4, same time defending the f2 and hitting the bishop. But after some depth calculation, I come out with a very strong move, that is h5. So the reply is force. I'm giving up this piece for tremendous mating attack, which start with the move rook captures f2. My opponent responded with the move knight to c4, but you are about to witness breakdance by white king. So following moves are like this. So finally king has sat down on the f1, and now the whole idea will reveal, because my monster h pawn will roll down to the h1 and checkmate white king. And believe it or not, but white is completely helpless. He continued with the move knight to e3. I counterattack his knight with the move rook to g3. He defended with the rook. Then the obvious move h3 occurs. He finally tried to activate his rook with the move rook to d1, but it's too little too late. I capture another pawn, giving away to the h-pawn. He played rook to d4, and the final blow h2. Somebody stop me. Oh, they can't. Okay, I hope with this wonderful brief analysis, you can play confidently against the move knight to f3. It's time to look out the most critical move d4.